Welcome back to the deep dive. We're jumping into your sources today on a topic that really hits home. How change actually works, especially in our relationships and, the world around us. We've got some really thought-provoking stuff here from a piece called Changing Myself Changes My World, and some questions designed to, well, really get under the surface. So our goal today, let's try to cut through the usual ways we think about change, changing ourselves, changing others, changing situations, and unpack what this source is suggesting. Quite different. And what it means for you.
Yeah, it's definitely a perspective that makes you question those neat lines we tend to draw. Me versus them, or my change totally separate from their change. It suggests maybe those boundaries aren't quite so solid.
Okay, let's dive right in then. The source just immediately challenges these common ideas, right? Self versus other, my change versus your change. It's saying these are more psychological concepts, not quite real.
Exactly. And what's interesting is how it frames that. It's saying our minds create these separations. This is me, that's you, I act on you. But that might not reflect the underlying reality of how things, well, shift and change.
It's like our mental map has borders. The actual territory doesn't.
Precisely. So instead of seeing change as one thing acting on another, like, a subject changing an object.
Right.
The source talks about change happening within something called the flow of relationships.
The flow of relationships. Okay, what does that mean exactly?
Well, this idea of flow seems absolutely central. It shifts the focus. Change doesn't just start inside one person or thing in isolation. It sort of emerges from the dynamic connection, the interplay between things. Think less like billiards, one ball hitting another, and more like currents mixing in water. It's about the interaction itself.
Got it. Which leads to this really striking metaphor they use. Change isn't a simple cause and effect chain, but an interdependent vibration.
Yes. That phrase, interdependent vibration, that's fundamental here. It's not A pushes B, B pushes C.
Right.
It suggests everything is kind of resonating together, constantly influencing each other. Change is this continuous mutual thing happening between entities because they're connected.
Like tuning forks. You strike one, the other hums.
Exactly like that. It's about mutual resonance, not just a one-way street.
So where is this idea coming from? They pull from different fields, right? Physics, for one, contrasting Newton with quantum mechanics.
Yeah, and it's important to see that as more of a metaphor, I think. It's not saying relationships are quantum physics.
Okay, good.
But it's using the idea from quantum interaction where things can be fundamentally linked, entangled, even to suggest that maybe we're more deeply interconnected and influencing each other than the old separate objects view allows. It challenges that idea of isolation.
Makes sense. And then there's the ecology analogy. When one thing changes in an ecosystem, the whole system gets, subtly readjusted.
Yes, subtly readjust. I think that word subtly is key. It's not always a massive, obvious shift, but a change in one part, say, one species sends ripples. Everything else has to slightly adapt, realign. The impact is systemic, even if the start was small and local.
Which connects directly back to us with that statement, my change is already part of others' change.
If you follow that ecological logic, yeah, it has to be true, doesn't it? You're part of these complex ecosystems, your family, your workplace, your friendships.
Right.
So when you shift internally your attitude, how you react, what you focus on, you're automatically creating those subtle readjustments in the system, in the people connected to you. Your internal change isn't in a vacuum. It's already echoing in their world.
And they bring in philosophy too. Buddhism. Specifically.
Jungi.
Interdependent origination.
Right, Jungi. Which provides this really deep philosophical underpinning for the whole thing. It basically says nothing exists on its own. Everything arises and changes, only because it depends on other things.
So no independent self.
Exactly. And the source argues that holding on to this illusion of a fixed, separate I is what makes us think we need to push change onto a separate them. It blinds us to this natural, interdependent vibration that's already happening.
Okay, so that's the theory. What about things we can actually, observe? Patterns of change. It mentions a fractal structure.
The fractal idea is neat. Fractals show the same basic pattern repeating at different sizes, right?
Like a coastline or a snowflake.
Yeah. So the suggestion here is that the fundamental way change works, this interconnected resonance maybe looks similar, whether it's one person changing a habit or a whole society shifting. The small scale mirrors the large scale.
Okay, this next part feels really practical, connecting the behavior. It says if you want to influence others, modeling the change is way more powerful than trying to persuade them.
Yes, and think about why, based on what we've discussed. Persuasion often feels like you're trying to force something onto someone else, right, from the outside.
Yeah, It can definitely trigger defenses.
Exactly. But modeling is different. You're embodying the change within that shared relationship space. You're not lecturing. You're just being different in connection with them. It kind of sidesteps that whole resistance thing.
And that ties right into the next point. Relationship is a mirror. My state induces others' reactions.
This is huge. The idea is that your internal state, how you're feeling, your openness, your tension, whatever, isn't just inside you. It gets reflected back.
How so?
The way people react to you is, to a large extent, a response to the energy or attitude you're bringing into that shared space. If you're projecting anxiety, you're probably going to see anxious or defensive reactions mirrored back. Bring calm, you might get calm. Your state shapes the reflection.
Wow. Okay. Which leads to my change is an unconscious map for others.
Yeah, connecting the modeling and the mirror. So you change your internal state, you start being different in the relationship. That's the modeling part.
Right.
That change behavior gets mirrored back in their reactions, but it's not like you handed them instructions.
No, it's subtle.
It's an unconscious thing. You've essentially demonstrated a new way to be in that relationship, a new pattern. You've drawn a different path on the shared map, and they might notice it, feel it, and maybe even start to follow it without ever talking about it.
Okay, so pulling this all together. The interdependent vibration, the mirror, the modeling, the source confronts that common feeling we have, right? That the world doesn't change, or it's just so hard to change things out there.
Exactly. And it says that feeling, that illusion, comes from thinking of the world as this separate external object, something totally outside of us.
Like we're here, and the world is over there, static.
Right. And if you see it that way, of course it feels immovable. You feel small. It feels big and resistant. It completely ignores our connection, our constant interaction with it.
So the truth, according to this source, is when I change myself, the world I encounter is already different. The world is a mirror of interaction created by me.
Yeah, and the mechanism there is fascinating. It's not saying the physical world instantly rearranges itself.
Okay, good clarification.
It's that your internal change shifts how you interact with everything. It changes your perception, how you act, how you react, and crucially, how others react to you. So the world you experience, the dynamic relational reality you're in, that has changed. Because you, the center of that experience, have changed.
It's like changing the glasses you're wearing. The scene looks different.
Precisely. And those reframed statements really hammer it home. Do not try to change the world. If your eyes change, the world wears a different face.
And the parallel one, do not try to persuade others. If your being changes, others' hearts resonate.
You see the pattern, both point inward. The leverage point is internal. Changing your perception, your eyes, or your core way of being, your being. That's not just navel-gazing. It has this direct outward effect. It changes the face the world presents and creates the potential for that resonance with others. Much more effective than force.
Okay, let's make this really concrete for people listening. How can you actually use this idea of interdependent vibration, the mirror modeling, in everyday life?
Yeah.
For, personal growth or making relationships better?
Well, the big practical takeaway, I think, is about where you put your energy. Instead of spending all your time strategizing how to fix that difficult colleague or change your family dynamic or solve some frustrating situation out there.
Which is what we usually do.
Right. The source suggests focusing that energy inward. Look at your state in that interaction. Are you bringing tension, fear, judgment? And then consciously work on shifting that. Can you bring curiosity instead? Calmness, openness.
So change your side of the vibration.
Exactly. Change your contribution to the interdependent vibration. Model the way you wish the interaction felt. By doing that, you change the reflection you're getting in the mirror. You offer a totally new possibility for how things can unfold.
Well, what about, are external factors totally irrelevant then? Like, if my company's downsizing, that's not just me, right?
That's a really important question. And no, the source talks about interdependence, remember, and the flow of relationships. It doesn't say external factors vanish.
Okay.
It reframes them. They are part of the complex system you're interacting with. But the crucial insight is that your internal state and actions are your point of influence within that system. You don't control the external event, like the downsizing, but changing your internal state, maybe from panic to proactive planning or from blame to collaboration, fundamentally changes how you interact with that event and the world you experience because of it. The external is real, but your relationship to it is fluid.
It really is amazing how these different fields, physics metaphors, ecology, Buddhist philosophy, behavioral psychology, they all seem to converge on this core idea, Interconnectedness, the power of the internal shift. Are they presented as totally separate things or more integrated?
They seem really integrated. It's like the source is using different languages, science, philosophy, psychology, to point to the same fundamental truth. Nothing is truly separate, and change happens through connection. They reinforce each other to build this coherent picture that maybe counterintuitively says the most potent way to influence your world is to work on yourself.
It definitely flips the script on what changing the world or even changing ourselves usually means.
Absolutely. It makes change less of a task you do to something else and more of a state you cultivate within this dynamic web of relationships. The quickest way to experience a different reality isn't necessarily to rearrange the furniture outside, but to shift the ground you're standing on internally.
What a different way to look at things.
That,
Seriously, moving from feeling like this separate agent trying to push against a resistant world to seeing ourselves as part of this flow, this vibration, where changing ourselves actually changes the world we meet. And that idea that your state is mirrored, that your change is an unconscious map for others. Wow. It really makes you pause and think about where you're focusing your efforts when you want something to be different.
yeah, it suggests the real illusion isn't that the world can't change, it's that we keep looking at it as if it's static and separate from us, instead of seeing it as, in part, a dynamic reflection of who we are and how we're showing up.
So a final thought for you listening. Think about one specific interaction, one situation in your life right now where you feel stuck, where you really wish things would change. What might happen if, just as an experiment, you stopped focusing on changing the other person or the external details, and instead put all that energy into simply shifting your own internal state, your own reactions, your own way of being within that situation? What might shift then? Something to maybe play with until next time.